suitable, she'll ask the question. But I would request the scholars to be very intent while listening to the lecture so that they can pose certain relevant questions, right? Uh, the key here is
Sure, ma'am.
relevant, right?
Sure, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Arif, Dr. Arif, are you there? Neha, do you have the rights to permit the people inside? Because I can see the speaker. Neha?
Yes, ma'am, I have the rights.
Okay, I think we have our expert with us.
Yes, I can see Dr. Michael there.
So, Dr. Goldman, welcome to the forum. Thank you for the kind acceptance. I hope you are able to hear us.
Maybe he'll join us shortly. He was there, but there was some glitch. Arif, a few students want to join, and they're saying that they're not getting the permit to join. Tameen is one of them. So
Sir
you
is
can
here.
let. Who is there?
I'll make sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And sir is also here.
A very good morning to you, Dr. Michael, sir. Am I audible, sir? Dr. Michael, sir, am I audible to you?
Dr.
Abdullah,
Michael Goldman, sir, can you hear us? Are we audible to you? I think there is some problem in the speaker.
I'll put it in the chat box.
You do that. Abdullah, you were in touch with him through WhatsApp. Is there any other channel of communication with him so that you can just get in touch with him right now?
I think sir has left. Just seen the notification.
Right. Yes, sir.
We'll just wait till 9 o'clock, right? Maybe he was just checking the settings and all, right? Just wait.
Hi, good morning, sir. Dr. Michael, sir. Can you hear? Can you hear me, sir?
Yes. Good day. How are you?
I'm good, sir. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation for this lecture. We are very thankful to you. Myself, a scholar only with this department, School of Management and Business Studies, Jamia Hamdard, and a few of the respected faculty members are already here in the meet, and we are waiting for our dean, sir, to begin with the session and proceed with the welcome address and all. So Dr. Sadaf ma'am is here. And
hello, Dr. Michael. How are you?
Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, everyone.
Yeah.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, very good evening to you. That we forgot.
Yes, sir. Good evening. Because it is night time in their time zone.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
At the outset, thank you very much, Dr. Goldman, to accept our request and speaking to our PhD scholars and faculty members.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Neha, I think we can start now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sure. Good afternoon to Dr. Michael sir, and good morning to all of the all everyone present in India. So we will start the session, and Dr. Abdullah sir, I would like to request you to begin the event with the recitation of verses from Holy Quran.
Thank you, Neha. Uh, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قولوا آمنا بالله وما أنزل إلينا وما أنزل إلى إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق ويعقوب والأسباط وما أنزل إلى إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق ويعقوب والأسباط وما أوتي موسى وعيسى وما أوتي النبيون من ربهم لا نفرق بين أحد منهم ونحن له مسلمون. Translation, Quran, Surah Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 136. Say, we believe in Almighty God and what has been revealed to us, and what was revealed to Abraham, Ishmael, Ishaq, Jacob, and his descendant, and what was given to Moses, Jesus, and other prophets from their Lord. We make no distinction between any of them, and to Almighty God we all are submitted in obedience. Thank you so much. Very we are welcome to Michael Goldman, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abdullah sir. Now I would like to invite Professor Shibu John sir to formally deliver the welcome address for our eminent personality. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Good evening, Dr. Michael Goldman. And we are very much thankful for you to take your time and talk to our students, our PhD scholars, our faculty members. I just give you a brief introduction about the school and university. Basically, School of Management and Business Studies, it's a quite big school in the university. There are around 11 schools in the university, and out of 11, one of the important school is School of Management and Business Studies. We have nearly 1,500 students in the school, and we are offering PG undergraduate programs, postgraduate programs, and PhD programs, and we have been offering it since very long. We have specialized management programs like health management, hospital management, and pharmaceutical management. Other than those regular MBA programs where we offer marketing, human resource, international business, IT, etc., etc. So we have nearly 70 to 80 PhD scholars registered as of now, and we have been offering PhD programs for a very long time now. And undergraduate level, we are offering BBA programs, BCom, and hotel management. Jamia Hamdard is basically prominent universities in India, and we have been ranking in the top 25-30 universities in the country. Though it's a small university with around 800 plus students, but prominently known particularly in the science area, because our School of Pharmacy, School of Science, and nursing colleges and medical college, they are very much highly ranked in the country, and students are very keen to join Jamia Hamdard for their science and medical related subjects. Other than medical science programs, we have very good engineering sciences. We are doing BSc, MSc, and PhD in information technology. Then we have a School of Interdisciplinary Sciences. We have School of Traditional Medicine, which is called Unani Medicine. Under that, we are offering undergraduate medicine programs, postgraduate, and PhD programs. And Jamia Hamdard is located in South Delhi, which is very posh area in the country. And Jamia Hamdard has been there for last 32 years. And sir, I just wanted to thank you for taking up the subject. I understand that the subject is very prominent, particularly there are a lot of publications except there are a lot of competition. So your lecture will definitely, give some motivation, benefit PhD scholars. And other than PhD scholars, we have also invited our postgraduate students. So hopefully they'll be, going through the presentation and the lecture on YouTube channel, because simultaneously this is being YouTube also. To Dr. Michael Goldman to speaking to our students. I understand that this is a little odd time for you to address, but nevertheless, you have taken the time from your busy schedule and addressing our students. And we are also looking forward to meet you in person sometimes. Hopefully, whenever you come to India, you consider Jamia Hamdard as your, a meeting point, and we will be very much delighted if you, make it to Jamia Hamdard in some point of time. Once again, I welcome you, sir, and over to Neha for further process.
Thank you so much, sir. And now I would like to request Dr. Sadaf Siraj ma'am, Assistant Professor of our department, to introduce the speaker. Over to you, ma'am.
A very good morning to all of you, and a very good evening to Dr. Michael. It's a little glitch in my camera, that's why I cannot switch on the camera right now. It gives me immense pleasure in introducing our speaker of the session, Dr. Michael M. Goldman. Dr. Michael M. Goldman is Associate Professor at University of San Francisco. In addition to teaching the Sports Management Master's Program at University of San Francisco, he is also the adjunct faculty at the Gordon Institute of Business Sciences in Johannesburg. The editor-in-chief of Emerald Emerging Market Case Studies. Dr. Michael Goldman is President, North American Case Research Association and board member, Case Research Foundation. He has been the Vice President Programs, North American Case Research Association in the year 2019-20, Marketing and International Business Track Chair, North American Case Research Association in the year 2018-19. His area of research includes sports marketing, sponsorship, and case research, and he's got innumerable number of peer-reviewed research articles, case studies, book chapters, and books to his credit. Dr. Goldman has been a recipient of various awards, namely the Best Case Silver Award from North American Case Research Association Conference in 2019, Charlo Prize Award recognizing excellence in teaching based on moral values in 2017, Best Case Bronze at North American Case Research Association Conference for Super Bowl 50 Case Study 2017, Paul R. Law Fellowship from Case Research Foundation 2015, to name a few. This is a very, very brief introduction of Professor Michael Goldman, because I was receiving a 29-page long academic resume. So it was very difficult for me to just jot down the crisp achievements of Sir. So you will be happy to know that even our faculty members, Professor Reshma Nasreen, Dr. Abdullah, myself, Dr. Saidul Nisa, we've been associated with Emerald Emerging Market Case Studies for a pretty long time, under the capacity of authors as well as reviewers. So it would be a pleasure listening to you, sir. And with this brief note, I would like to hand it on to you. So please go and address the gathering, sir. Thank you so much.
Sir, you're
There we
muted.
go. All right. So, yes, should be open now. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
All right. And you should be able to see my slide. Is that right?
Yeah, we can see the slide.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for those very kind words and introduction. Dr. Sharaf, you made me sound quite old. I was told last week, now that I've been promoted to full professor at the university from August this year, that there's pretty much nothing else for me to do, that now that I'm full professor, it's like one step away from retirement, which again makes me sound way too old. But thank you. That's very kind for highlighting some of the things that I've been involved with of late. And of course, some of that happened in India. And I've very much enjoyed my time in Delhi and other parts of India over the last few decades. And so look forward to going back and spending time in Delhi and Mumbai and Bangalore and Calcutta and all the wonderful parts of the country. So I do look forward to jumping on a plane and being able to do that again soon. What I hope to be able to do here today is share some thoughts with you via these slides, but also the conversation around case research, and explore with you what I've learned in the North American Case Research Association space, as well as the Emerald Emerging Markets Case Studies Collection space, about how case research can be a substantial part of scholarship and the kind of intellectual contribution that we make. So I hope those comments will be useful to you over the next little while. The message tab is open on my screen. So if you want to type in some messages as we're going, questions, comments, queries, disagreements, please pop them into the chat and let's have a conversation over the next while. And also please feel free to stop me anytime to engage in a conversation around these issues. I hope that that's fine. And of course, if the technology fails us and you can't hear me or can't see anything as well, just let me know so we can move on from there. So what I wanted to do here in this first few slides is talk about the role of case research in scholarship and in the kind of impact that we can make as scholars. I mean, if we take a step back and we think about why many of us do this, right? Why are we scholars? Why are we academics? Why do we do higher education and higher degrees? And why do we do PhDs and think about publishing? For many of us, it's about making some kind of impact. It's about making a contribution to some bigger question, some kind of problem or issue that we see that we'd like to apply our minds and some good science in order to make a contribution. And in the world of business schools and management education, we talk about this idea of intellectual contribution, of research output, of research scholarship. And I think what's been really interesting for me to see within an AACSB accreditation world, as well as an Emerald context, is the debates about impact, the debates about how do we make a more substantial, a more meaningful impact through our work. And I think part of this debate has been a realization among many scholars, right, around the world, that just publishing something, doing the work, getting peer reviewed, going through multiple rounds of peer review, and then finally getting published, that is not the end point. That's actually one of the starting points in making an impact. And that's a challenge for us as scholars, right? Because a lot of our work, the publication is the output, right? We build our resumes. We build these long, crazy resumes with all of these publications as if the publication is the final step. But these debates about real impact that we've been having at the AACSB and in other places really argues that the publication is the first step in making an impact. And that potentially what we do with the publication and what happens to that work once it's published is often more important than the fact that we had it published in the first place. And so this area around real impact, I think, is part of what we want to think about as we start this conversation around case research. Because I think, as you can imagine, I think case research provides a really interesting opportunity for us to make this kind of real impact in our work. Here's an organization that you may have had some exposure to, responsible research in business and management, a collection of scholars that you may have read some of their papers and some of their position work, really challenging this idea of a traditional standard approach to academia. And as you can see here, arguing that the kind of contribution that we make in research should be thinking about some of these other questions, thinking about the role of business in society and how the research that we do starts to help shape the role of business in society. How do we make business more responsible, more sustainable, more of a positive contribution to the livelihoods of everyone? Think about the Sustainable Development Goals, think about the UN Compact, think about some of these other moves in society to leverage the strength of business in some way. The RBBM or RRBM also talks about partnerships with industry. And that's a real challenge, I think, for some of us in academia who might have grown a little bit apart from industry. Sometimes I think that when we think about most doctoral programs, one of the weaknesses of some of those doctoral programs is that they disconnect us from industry. They disconnect us from practice. We conduct research through quantitative survey work, where we might try and survey hundreds or thousands of people, but we're not really working closely with organizations. We may not be developing those kind of relationships. And then when we start teaching, either as doctoral students or as early career faculty, we're often removed from business. We're working with students, we're in the classroom, we're on campus. We're not necessarily engaged with executives, we're not necessarily doing consulting, and we're not necessarily in business or in organizations or working closely with organizations. And this raises questions about the extent to which we are partnering, and together we are delivering management education that helps management as a key stakeholder. So these kinds of ideas starting to emerge and really challenge the way we approach this. They're not necessarily new ideas, though, because Clayton Christensen, as many of you know from Harvard Business School, recently passed away, and one of his most substantial contributions was in the area of disruptive innovation, as many of you know. And he was reflecting here a few years ago in the MIT Sloan Management Review about some of his early work and how sitting across the table and having conversations with executives, with decision makers in Silicon Valley and other parts of the world was critical to understanding how decisions were being made. And so what Clayton Christensen's really reflecting here is the combination of and qualitative work. This idea of mixed method and considering multiple sources of types so that we can answer a question, that we can investigate a problem more comprehensively. And so Clayton Christensen did fabulous statistical work, right, and was able to show some predictive, analysis. But it was the conversations, and it was discussing these issues with practicing managers that really allowed him to open up some of these issues. So, examples like this are quite useful. I've got another example over here from Michael Porter, who made the same kind of statement around his work. Think about Porter's 5 forces. Think about Porter's diamond framework around competitiveness of industries and clusters and microeconomics of competitiveness. Quite a heavy quantitative focus. And here at the North American Case Research Association conference some years ago, he again was reflecting on his career and talking about how modeling was really important, but it was insufficient. And being able to sit down and do qualitative, in-depth case research really allowed him to come up with the kinds of frameworks that many of us teach and many of us learn in management programs all the time. So it's really an argument here for a more comprehensive approach, a more holistic approach to research, which includes this qualitative, case, longitudinal, in-depth kind of focus, which is hard, right? It requires partnership. It requires closeness to business, closeness to organizations, not just an objective, far away kind of survey. But the opportunity here is to make a more substantial impact. The impact that people like Clayton Christensen and Michael Porter have had on all of our lives in management and business is substantial. The examples here remind us that they don't do that just only with the quantitative work, right? They balance that with an important focus around case research. So what we're talking about here in these first introductory few comments is the importance of case research and where it fits in within this kind of broader idea of making an impact. There are, of course, 2 ways that you can publish case research. So you work with an organization or a few organizations, you deeply investigate some important questions with those organizations, you gather lots and lots of evidence from primary sources by talking to people, observations, field notes, obviously interviews, transcripts. You gather information from secondary sources, focused on one organization or a few organizations. Robert Yin has provided some really good guidance to us in the case research space with a really good little book around case research method, right? So we do that quality case research. Now, what do we do with it? Well, there's two ways in which you can publish, ways in which you can use your voice as a scholar to tell the rest of the world what you found. On the left of the slide is an article case. So that would be a case study that's written up in an article format, an article style, and it's published in a typical peer-reviewed article kind of journal, the Journal of Marketing, Journal of Management, whatever it might be. In these kinds of articles, the case is used as an example, the case is used as a tool to analyze, and the analysis and the application and the creation and extension of theory happens in the article. So it's one document, right? A typical kind of 20 to 30 page article where the case analysis and all that theory creation and theory extension work happens in the article. And those are often published and have made a substantial contribution, as mentioned before. The other way to do this is through discussion-based cases, also referred to as educational or teaching cases. This is another way of taking that research and making it much more impactful by spreading it much wider. Because teaching cases and discussion-based cases are used in classrooms around the world. As we do MBA programs or other management programs, we're spending day and night preparing case studies for the classroom. And as students, we're reading a whole bunch of case studies from Ivy and Emerald and Harvard and other places. As teachers, we're teaching these case studies and using them to make theories and content come alive. Those are teaching cases, otherwise known as discussion-based cases. Same research, same scholarship, same case research, but written in a very different way and published in a different kind of outlet. So EMCS, Emerging Market Case Studies, I'm currently the editor-in-chief, and we have associate editors around the world, including in India. We publish about 130 of those kinds of discussion-based cases every year. We publish the case study that's available for instructors to use anywhere around the world, as well as a teaching note document, which we'll talk more about, which is available only for instructors, only for professors, never for students. But it's based on the same research. The research is just used in a slightly different way. So think about, you have a case study database, you gather all this information, you do all the analysis. Now, how do you write it up? And this slide is saying, well, there are two ways of writing up that research. You write it up as an article case, and you publish one document, a manuscript, and you publish it in a typical journal. Or you write it up as a teaching case, where it's about 8 pages, where you don't include the answer. In a teaching case, you set it up for the students to solve, right? As many of the students in the room will know, if they're preparing cases for class tomorrow morning, they know that they're preparing cases where the answer is not in the case. And it's their job to do the analysis and come to class and debate what the solution should be. And so as a case researcher, right, we're taking that case research and we're writing it up into a case document of about 8 pages, and then a teaching note of about 8 to 10 or 12 pages, which the students never see. And so those are the two different ways in which we're going to take our case research. I'm going to focus my comments a little bit today, focused on the right-hand side, the discussion-based cases. But I'm also very happy to talk about the left-hand side and opportunities to publish case research in different ways. As I mentioned, it's about style, it's about tone, it's about how we write this research up for publication. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see an example of one of my previous papers, right? So this would be a typical article. You can recognize the kind of narrative tone here. It's written in a scholarly way. It's written for other academics, right? The 2.5 people on the planet who might read our typical academic articles, right? We spend weeks and months writing these papers, and then we go through multiple rounds of peer review and we publish it, and maybe our mothers, if we're lucky, actually read the article. And so that's typical academic publishing on the left-hand side. It's important. It makes a contribution. It's certainly part of my resume, and it's part of many of your careers. So it's an important part of our portfolio. On the right-hand side is similar research, but written in a case study way, a case study style, right? A teaching case narrative voice. And you can see just with this quick example how the tone is different, the kind of phrasing, the kind of sentences, the kind of paragraphs. How would you describe, what metaphor or descriptive words would you use to describe the example on the right-hand side? Let me pause and let you read a paragraph or two of the case on the right-hand side. And in the message chat function here on this Google Meet, those of you that are in this live call, add some words here for me. Tell me what this looks like and feels like and sounds like to you. How would you describe the tone? How would you describe the writing style on the right-hand side of the slide? Any thoughts? Let's see some comments coming through in the messages or chat section. All right, I see a hand raised. Let's see, whose hand was that? Oh, it came and went. Whoever raised their hand, do they want to grab the microphone? I saw a hand raised and then it disappeared. I don't see any comments in the chat yet. Are you able to add some comments in the chat? Rachi, you've raised your hand. Do you want to grab the microphone and tell us what you think about the voice and tone on the right-hand side?
Doctor,
Rajshri, please.
Good morning, sir. This
Hey, Rachi, yeah, I can hear you.
this case study looks like a story is being narrated. It's very fluent to read, and it creates an interest in the mind of the reader that what is there in this. So it actually catches the attention, and it's more of a like a narrative like thing. That's it.
Excellent, Rachi, thank you. So if you want to, there we go, thank you. Yeah, so what I heard Rachi talk about was the kind of style. She spoke about a narrative. She spoke about writing that maybe grabs her attention and tells a story. It's almost journalistic in style, right? It's if you read a great journal article, a newspaper article, or you read a great book, right? And you can't put the book down because page after page, it's a great book to read. And so that's what we're trying to capture with case study writing. The research is good quality scientific research. We're doing interviews, we're doing transcripts, we're analyzing those transcripts, we're using multiple sources of data. But when we write it up, we're writing it to be as interesting and engaging as possible. So as a case writer, we need to think about the audience we're writing for. On the left-hand side, we're writing for other academics, right? And other academics are lovely people, but they're fairly boring. And the style that we write when we write to other academics is fairly formal and fairly academic, right? On the right hand side, we're not writing for academics, right? It can be published in a peer reviewed journal, but we're not writing for academics. We're writing for students. We're writing for managers. We're writing for practitioners, right? And as we're seeing the comments come through in the chat, I'm seeing comments here about narrative, story format, writing like a book chapter, again, story-based writing. Exactly. So the comments coming through from Arif and Arti and Mudgal and others on the right-hand side, similar kind of ideas to what Rajshi said. That's what we're aiming for. So when we think about writing a case study, right, you need to think about the tone, you need to think about the style, you need to think about who you're writing for. Yeah, and that's an important component of putting that story together. So style is an important component. Let me remind you about the pieces of the output, right? The pieces that we publish. You can see here on the screen, there are two pieces. There's the case study document, which, as I said, is typically 8 pages long. It's what the students get. It's what's published and available online, either via Emerald Insight, which your library might subscribe to, which means everyone gets access to for free to all the cases in EMCS, or you publish it through Ivy or Harvard, in which case students kind of pay per case, or the institution pays per case. So that's the case study document, typically about 8 pages long. Talks about the dilemma, the decision that some kind of management character has to make. That's the core component of a case study. The story, the narrative is all about a problem, all about a decision. Think about some of the most interesting stories, movies, books, content that you've consumed. And very often, it's about some kind of crisis that's facing one or more people. And the story takes you in, and you get engaged and captured in thinking about the hero, the protagonist, the characters, right? That's what we're doing in a case study as well. But the hero here, or the protagonist, is the chief executive, or the head of marketing, or the head of operations, or the chief financial officer. It's the business person, it's the manager who has to make a decision. Do I internationalize my business and enter China using this strategy? Or do I consolidate my local operations and expand into 3 additional states in India? Or do I downsize and premiumize my offering and go online and target specific luxury segments in Europe? Whatever it might be, right? Business is looking to grow. Business is looking to survive post-COVID. Business is looking to internationalize or diversify. All of those create problems, issues, decisions. And that's great content for case studies that we use in the classroom to teach those skills. Remember, the reason that we do case research is to deeply understand an issue facing a business. The reason we write up that case research as a teaching case, as a discussion-based case, is for students in the classroom to learn about that issue and to learn about how to apply good content, frameworks, and tools to make better management decisions. Right? Managers get paid the big bucks. Managers get paid the big salaries because they have to make decisions. Decisions often with incomplete information when things are complex and messy. And that's the perfect kind of content for case studies about real organizations. So that's on the left-hand side, the case study. If you gather primary data, so interviews from protagonist, interviews in the company as part of your research, it needs to be signed off by the people you interview or by the organization. So what we publish in a case has to have the consent of the organization, of the people that you interviewed. So again, good quality research with a kind of institutional sign-off that's important from an ethics point of view. The teaching note, or also known as the instructor manual, is the second piece, right? And this is the secret document that students never see, right? It's not published online somewhere, right? It's never shared. It's only available for instructors, for professors who are teaching the case. And they apply for access to Emerald or Ivy or Harvard or wherever, and they get professor access, instructor access to the secret document. What's in the secret document? Well, there's two main things that we put into this teaching note document. The first is a teaching plan. Because it's a teaching note and this is a teaching case study, we write a good quality teaching plan. We define some learning outcomes. What do we want students to be able to do at the end of the case discussion? Do we want them to apply Porter's 5 forces to analyze the competitiveness and the rivalry and the profitability within an industry in order to recommend where in an industry a new entrant should locate themselves? That sounds like a good learning outcome. Do we want to students at the end of this case conversation to be able to segment a market using determining variables and cluster analysis to design a segmentation framework? Right? These are the kinds of learning outcomes that if I'm teaching strategy or I'm teaching marketing, we would expect to find, right? Because that's what we're teaching in a management classroom. So learning outcomes, and then how would instructors anywhere in the world pick up that case and use it? What are the questions that they would use in the classroom? What are the activities or exercises that they would use in the classroom? What's the group work? What's the exam assignment that they might use in the classroom? That's the teaching plan component in a teaching note. The other part of the teaching note is where we use our scholarship. So for our doctoral students and our early career faculty and all of the professors on the call, the teaching note has a section that does two things. One is we write about the theoretical background. It's kind of like a literature review. So we include some paragraphs where we summarize the key frameworks or theory or content that we want to teach in this case. So it's an opportunity for us as scholars to give a short literature review to help instructors anywhere in the world pick up our case. And if I'm teaching segmentation, I need to provide half a page or a page of up-to-date, good summary of the literature and research around segmentation, because that's what we want to teach through the case. So a theoretical background or some kind of literature review is often part of a teaching note. The second piece where we show our scholarship in a teaching note is in the model answers to the assignment questions. So we may have a set of assignment questions like the segmentation question or a branding question or a strategy question. As instructors and as scholars, we need to answer those questions fully in the teaching note, right? That's why it's a bit of a secret document. And so we write up a model answer and we use the theory and the frameworks and the literature and the content from those good articles and those good textbooks to develop a really good answer to every question we're going to ask in the classroom. That's the kind of preparation that we put into the teaching note. So a case study, typically about 8 pages. A teaching note could be quite a bit more, because when you build in all this good analysis and good theoretical application, the teaching note can be quite a bit more. So a few slides ago, I mentioned that we can publish case research as a case article, right? When we do that, we do everything in one, right? We leave out the teaching plan, but everything else comes together in a case article. When we do a discussion-based case or a teaching case, it has these two pieces, the case study and the teaching note. And so I hope that's helpful for you to think about the structure of what we put out, right, as instructors. For some of you, you may be thinking about how on earth do I start? Where on earth do I start? How do I get ideas for great cases? And how do I start this process of doing case research? Well, if you look at Robert Yin's book and you look at some of the other chapters that I've written and other people have written around case research, there's really two main areas that great ideas come from. The one is the syllabus. And so as teachers, we need to teach stuff, right? Tomorrow evening in Los Angeles, I'm going to be teaching a class about sponsorship. Okay. And it's about sports sponsorship, and it's about return on investment for sports sponsorship. So I'm teaching that class in Los Angeles tomorrow evening. I want to use a case study. Now, if there isn't a good case study that I've written recently, or there isn't a good case study that is available that I want to use, I've got to come up with my own. And that's often a place where instructors start. They look at their syllabus, they look at what they need to teach, and if they can't find the perfect case, then they go and find one to write themselves. Okay, and so that's an important starting point. And so for the instructors, for the professors on the call, I would challenge you to think about your typical syllabus, your course outline, your plan for the semester, and look at where the opportunities are to add a new case, to add a case that's more recent than the ones you're already using, to add a case where there isn't currently a case in your syllabus, to think about cases perhaps from different parts of the world. Are you relying on a great case from Delhi, and maybe you need to internationalize your class? Or are you relying on a case from the US, which might be a really interesting company in the US, but your students in Delhi are slightly less interested? So again, opportunities to write new cases, to find new cases based on the syllabus. The other side of the slide talks about stories. And here's the great opportunity for us to think about, what are people talking about? What are the great business stories that are taking off? What are the companies? I think about some years ago when I was last in India and spent time at Wipro and Infosys and TCS and Mahindra and Tata and Sons and all of these really interesting businesses that I went to go and visit. And many of those had some fabulous stories that the rest of the world needed to hear, about family businesses, about technology, about outsourcing and insourcing, and all of these important concepts from a few years ago. And so that's a great place to look. Look around where you are, read the newspaper, read the right kind of sources, think about the business stories, talk to alumni, right? Our institutions are graduating all these super smart students, and many of them are going on to be senior executives in really interesting businesses. Are we as professors maintaining relationships with those graduates, with those alumni? Are we as professors going and visiting them and inviting them into the classroom to give talks and going and talking to them about what they're doing on a daily basis? If we are, we're often hearing really interesting stories of the decisions that they're having to make in business right now. And if we've cultivated those relationships, if we nurtured those relationships between professor and student, between professor and alumni, we then have a great access, right, to write those kinds of cases. So certainly if I think about the cases I've written, many of those have come from industry contacts, from consulting projects that I've been involved in, from alumni conversations I've had, or just interesting stories I've read about, and I phone them up and I convince them to write a case. So those are the kinds of ways that you go about starting to do it. Contacts are important, right? Nurturing those contacts, and then thinking about the kinds of sources that we're using, both primary sources and secondary sources. Here's an example of some of those sources. And so this was a case study I wrote about Stephen Curry at the Golden State Warriors. So as you may know, the Golden State Warriors are in the playoffs right now, in the NBA playoffs. And this is a case study I wrote where Steph Curry was sponsored by Brita. Brita is a water filter company. around the world, including in the US. And what I've just copied onto the slide for you is an example of the methods section to give you an idea of the kind of sources that I used. So I used both primary sources and secondary sources. Primary sources was interviews, a number of hours of interviews with managers at the sponsoring company Brita to understand the decisions that they made, to understand how they did things, why they did things. I recorded all of those. I had pages and pages and pages of transcripts that I was able to analyze, and I had sign off from Brita, from the managers, for the conducting of those interviews and the publishing of the case study. But importantly, I also got access to some internal documents from Brita that they were prepared to share with me, and also some external sources. And so you can see here on the notes on the right-hand side of the slide, the kinds of external secondary sources that we all have access to via our libraries. Many of our institutions have fabulous libraries. We just need to use them. We need to be very friendly with the librarians so that we can access these kinds of sources from these databases. And so when I write this case study about Brita and Steph Curry, I'm relying on information that's coming not just from Stephen Curry and from Brita, but I'm also relying on information from other consultants, from analysts, from other researchers, from other media and commentators. So I'm using multiple primary and secondary sources. I'm building what Robert Yin called a case study database. And the more extensive your case study database is, the more quality your case can be, because you're able to draw from multiple different viewpoints in the case study. Let me spend a few moments talking about some of the kind of summarizing some of the key points I've made so far around the case study. And of course, if there are any questions, just pop up a hand, or write your questions in the chat and I can come to them. We spoke about the opening section, that opening paragraph or two that I showed you for the Bright Rock case some slides ago. You remember in that opening paragraph, there was a protagonist, Suzanne Stevens. You got to meet her and you got to understand who she is. She's the chief marketing officer of this life insurance company, Bright Rock, in South Africa, and it's 2015, right? So you know where she is, when she is, who she is, and you also have some information about the dilemma. She had to make a decision in, I think it was early 2015, she had to make a decision about her marketing spend for her marketing plan for the coming 12 months, graph or so. So that's why the opening section is so important. It's like that movie that you go and watch, that film, and in the first few minutes of the film, it captures you, right? And you get to understand some of these key questions in the first few minutes. That's what we're doing in a case study as well. As Rachi mentioned, the narrative, right? We're writing in the past tense. We're using endnotes and sourcing. It's a storytelling kind of flow. And the dilemma, the problem facing the protagonist, comes all the way through the case. It's a thread throughout the case, not just in the opening paragraph and not just at the end of the case. Language is important. Remember, we're writing these cases not just for ourselves, not just for other academics, we're writing it for students and managers all around the world. So we need to make sure that we're writing for an international audience, that our English is really good, that we've got good editing and proofreading so that someone in New York or London or Singapore or Beijing or Johannesburg or anywhere can pick up that case and they can understand it. It's accessible. They see it as good quality writing, and they want to use it in their classrooms. Because here's the secret. Professors do not want to use cases that have errors in them, because then the professor looks like they made a mistake. Professors do not want to use cases that have language errors or where the language style is not appropriate, or is in some way clumsy. And so as writers, we spend quite a bit of time making sure that we express ourselves as clearly, as professionally, and as internationally as we can. So that's an important issue. We all grow up in different cultures, in different language backgrounds. Those of us that grew up somewhat under the English Empire, if we think about the Commonwealth and we think about the colonies, we all have slightly different experiences of English. The important thing to think about when we're publishing in English is to make sure that our tone, our grammar, our style is appropriate for the audiences we're writing. and one of the things we do see is that some authors struggle to articulate, to communicate what they're trying to say in a way that is easily understandable in other parts of the world. So that's an important thing. Co-authors from other parts of the world really help. Proofreading, editing with people who write in other parts of the world really helps. Thinking about how what you write might be really understandable, the context, the issues might be really understandable in Delhi, but would someone in San Francisco who picks up this case, would they easily understand the issues? Has it been written in a way that I need to live in Delhi and I need to understand the Indian context in order to understand the case? Or has it been written smartly and cleverly so that the issues that are being raised and the way they're being spoken about are easily understandable and obvious to someone in another part of the world? This is hard. It's hard when we don't travel as much as we'd like to. It's hard when we haven't all lived in other parts of the world. It's hard to understand whether what we write is easily understandable. And so that's why co-authors and conferences around the world and doing presentations around the world and submitting your work around the world is a great way to get feedback and to learn and iterate and make sure that we're all writing so much better for an international audience. I want to spend a few minutes talking about the teaching note, if I may, and then I want to open up to questions and discussion and anything else that you want to raise. Here are a few slides as I start wrapping up here about the teaching note. Remember, this is that secret document, and it covers a number of important areas around the teaching plan and around the scholarship. Here are the main sections on the slide around the teaching note on the left-hand side. So we have a very cool guide available on Emerald's website where you can download a template and you can see exactly how these sections are constructed in a teaching note. So as with all academic publishing, as with all scholarship, there are some rules and there's a bit of a structure that you want to follow. So there's going to be a synopsis section which summarizes what the case is about. There's going to be some learning objectives, as I mentioned, some learning outcomes. You're going to be clear about the target audience. Who is this case for? The research method, I showed you a paragraph, right, that describes the kind of research method. The teaching plan we spoke about, how would you teach this plan? What are the activities? How would you teach it online? How would you teach it in the classroom? How would you teach it in different ways? Assignment questions, and importantly, the answers to those questions. We spoke about those pieces. The last aspect here is around the epilogue or the postscript. So let's go back to that case about Bright Rock. Suzanne Stevens, January 2015, has a marketing media spend choice to make. The case does not say what she did. The case gives information for students to then propose what she should do. But in the teaching note, we tell the instructor what Suzanne did. So in that case, if you're an instructor or a professor and you look at the teaching note for that Bright Rock case, you will see that we talk about what Suzanne Stevens actually did. How did she spend her money? What choices did she make? And why did she do it? So it kind of gives the answer, not that it's the right answer, but it's the answer that she chose. And again, remember, case studies are not about guessing what the protagonist is going to do. It's more about analysis and arguing what the protagonist should do. What's the most appropriate? What's the smartest solution for the problem that the protagonist is facing? The epilogue or postscript section tells what the protagonist actually did. But remember that when you're teaching a case or when you're writing the teaching note, it doesn't mean it's the right answer. It's just an answer. It's just what the protagonist chose to do. It may have been successful, it may not have been successful. The learning in a case study is not about guessing what the protagonist did. The learning in the case study is to go through the process of analysis in order to justify an argument for what the protagonist should do. And then lastly, there's some exhibits and a board plan that's often included in the teaching note. And we have examples of teaching notes on the Emerald website, as well as that templates and other guides to help you, including here you can see the Learning Hub. So we've developed a free resource for students, for doctoral students, for professors, a free online resource. You can access it there at caseshub.emeraldpublishing.com that goes through all of these steps and helps you both learn how to study case studies, but also how to write and teach case studies in different contexts. So that's a great follow-up that you may want to consider. Bloom's taxonomy is a very important framework when we think about teaching. For teaching case studies, we need to think about how we're going to facilitate learning. How are we going to teach something? For the last half an hour or so, it's been one-way traffic, right? It's been me talking to you. Not necessarily the best way for us to learn, right? We know that learning should be interactive. Learning should be engaging. One-way traffic is typically not the best way to facilitate learning. Bloom's taxonomy is this really helpful framework that you can see on the slide, and there's a number of versions of this that challenges us to think about the learning outcomes. And it focuses on these verbs, right? What will the students be able to do? We see a number of cases submitted to EMCS, to Emerald, where the writers are saying, this case will help someone understand. That's it. Understand this, understand that, understand the third thing. That's not the most useful learning outcome. As you can see on the slide, there are a number of layers that are deeper, that are better in terms of learning outcomes. And so in your learning outcomes, when you construct them, when you think about teaching, and of course, many doctoral programs, unfortunately, do not do an extensive enough job thinking about how do we teach. I think it's, if I think especially in the US, it's the biggest, someone's audio is on.
Heather Ali,
There we go.
sorry.
That's all good. All good. I think, one of the funny things in doctoral education, or maybe the sad things in doctoral education, especially in the US, is that students will spend 2 years, 4 years, 6 years completing their doctorate. And they will spend all their time focusing on research, right? And they will write these papers and they will publish these papers. And then they get their doctorate. And what job do they get? They get a job teaching. And how much time in their doctorate did they spend learning how to teach? Nothing. So it's one of the crises, right, around doctoral education in many countries around the world is some doctoral programs do not do a good enough job focusing on how do we prepare doctoral students, scholars, to not just be researchers, but also be teachers. And in a teaching note, the teaching plan section, these learning outcomes, it's a focus on teaching. How do we facilitate learning? So I think that's an important piece here. Just some quick comments around analysis. You've heard me talk a few times about case analysis, about analysis within the teaching note. Here are 3 kinds of analysis areas that I would encourage us to think about. Obviously, it's analysis around the decision, right? We've spoken about this decision or dilemma within the case. So what's the core management decision-making dilemma? Are there some additional issues? What are the implications, options? Analysis that's about understanding the dynamics of the decision. The second driver, or the second, you can see the drivers, the second issue in analysis is what are the underlying drivers? What are the causes? What are the issues that lead to this decision? What are the variables that managers need to take into account when they make these decisions? So the market context, the organization context, the personal context. That protagonist, Suzanne Stevens, where is she in her career? How does she get on with her executive team? How much authority and how much soft power has she got within the organization? How old is the organization? What kind of culture does the organization have? How hierarchical is the organization? The market context, how many competitors are there? How much rivalry or vigor in the competition is there? How much regulation is there within that market environment? These are the drivers, right, that underpin some of that analysis. And then lastly, what are the theories or models that explain those decisions? Psychology frameworks, sociology frameworks, economic frameworks, financial frameworks, strategic frameworks, organizational frameworks, leadership frameworks. These are typically the courses that we study, and they have a body of knowledge. They have some frameworks that we want students to apply and to learn. And so that's part of the analysis in the teaching note as well. So when we think about analysis, it kind of happens in these three ways. And we drive that through the case, and we drive that through in the teaching note. My last slide here before we open up to some more questions is a bit of a checklist. So this is a bit of a busy slide. The words that I've underlined on the slide are your shortcut, your summary, your executive summary here, your checklist of the kinds of issues you need to make sure before you submit. So have you got characters in the case, right, that people can connect with? Are there decisions in emerging markets, right, in countries across Africa, in the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, etc., Southeast Asia, East Asia, Eastern Europe, Latin America? Are there interesting decisions that protagonists have to make? Decisions, dilemmas. Are we using good sources? Are we using good research? Have we written it professionally and engaging in a very international English style? How much teaching plan and teaching objectives have we done? And have we thought about the analysis around the question? So a bit of a checklist that I hope is useful as you think about constructing the case and constructing the teaching note from good quality case research. And as we said up front, it's all about making an impact. And so if we think about good quality case research that pulls together multiple sources that investigate interesting questions as part of a portfolio of our intellectual contribution, when we publish great teaching cases, they are used by hundreds, if not thousands of students around the world. Those students are taking our research that we're writing up in case studies, and they're using our research to learn how to make better management decisions. They're learning how to make organizations work better for everyone, stakeholders and shareholders. They're taking our research, which might happen in Delhi or Johannesburg or San Francisco, and they're using that research in their classrooms to make themselves better managers. I can't think of a better impact for the kind of work we do in scholarship, addressing issues, investigating problems, making a contribution to students, managers, and academics. And so that's why I think case research is a really interesting opportunity in this space. So let me pause on that point. Happy to share these slides afterwards if anybody does want to take a look. I see some questions coming through in the chat. So let me stop presenting here and I will start answering some questions. And if anybody wants to grab the microphone, please feel free.
Now,
I
house is
see,
open for question and answer session.
Great, sounds good. All right. So I see a question here from Arif. Many a times when we take up an upcoming topic, the decisions are not concrete. How would you suggest to put the conclusions of such in a case study? So Arif, if I'm understanding your question, the decision or dilemma being faced by the manager that you're interviewing, the case that you're writing, the answer, the real answer might not yet be clear. That's okay. Because remember, the primary purpose of a case study is to document a situation in time. And so let's say the protagonist is Arif, and Arif is the chief technology officer at an electric vehicle division of Tata Motor Companies, right? And Arif has been tasked with developing a market analysis for the launch of a Tata Nano electric vehicle. All right. So that might be something where in reality, Arif has not come up with a solution yet, but it's something that Arif is currently facing within the business. We could write that case in a very compelling way, right? And remember, the case study does not have the solution. So the case study ends with May 23, right? Arif is looking out the window and knows that he's got to run into a board meeting where he has to make an argument for what his market analysis is going to look like. And he's worried that he hasn't got enough slides in his presentation, whatever, right? So that's kind of Arif's dilemma. So that's our case study. And we can write that with interviews with Arif, with interviews with other people at the company, and with secondary sources. In the teaching note, when we do the questions and when we do the analysis, we don't need to know what Arif did. We don't need to know what the final solution was because we are proposing a solution. We're taking the information in the case, we're analyzing it, and we are coming up with the kind of market analysis that Arif would need to do. The only section in the teaching note that would be a little bit hard to write is the epilogue or the postscript. And there, if you were writing a case now in May 2022, and you were submitting it to me at Emerald in June or July 2022, you would just have a little paragraph in the postscript that says, at the time of submission, this market analysis has not yet been done and the protagonist is still struggling with the issue. That's fine because it's going to go through a few rounds of review, and let's say it's accepted in maybe December 22 or January 2023, and so by then you can probably write the postscript because by then you probably know what the company's done. So that's the only piece where it might be incomplete.
So with this underlying questions, which I think you have already answered from the perspective of the teaching note and from the perspective of the publication. Thank you for understanding the question, even the hidden parts as well. Thank you so much, sir.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Shahid, want to ask something?
Yeah.
Hi, good morning, sir. Thank you for the detailed, explanation of the whole case scenario. I have a very simple concern, and I'm sure most of the audience here will relate as a new researcher or of case studies, is that one of the great issues which we face is like, the new researchers, they find it very hard to strategically link it with the existing research, especially in the introductory phases, as you explained earlier. So what are your suggestions in this, especially for the newcomers here for this case study writing? I hope you got the perspective.
Yeah, Shahid, thank you. I think
Thank
I
you.
understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I think remember, there's two places to start. The one is the course that you want to teach it, or the theory that you want to investigate. So if you're a doctoral student or you're early career faculty and you're interested in investigating interesting questions, or you're a new teacher and you're thinking of teaching a specific course. That could be your starting point for thinking about developing the case. Let's say you're focused more on the theory piece. All great doctorates, all great scholars spend a lot of time thinking about a few theories or some specific variables within theories, right? Our lives as scholars, for many of us, is about focus. So Shahid, you may have a specific theory in mind as part of your research or as part of your work. What I would suggest is take that theory and think about how it's being manifest in practice. So within organizations, within teams, within strategies, within markets, whatever the context is, how is that theory being manifest? How are we able to see that theory in action? How are we able to use that theory to predict behavior, right, in some way? Um, that should give you ideas of the kind of organizations, the kinds of contexts that you could do case research around. In terms of connecting it then, Shahid, let's assume, let me give you an example from my context. Let's say I wanted to study brand positioning, and I wanted to study the way in which a new brand might position themselves competitively relative to market leaders. And I want to study, let's say it's the theory of Kevin Lane Keller, consumer-based brand equity, has a model of associative network theory, right? So in the marketing space, there's this heavy psychology theory from Kevin Lane Keller. And as a scholar, maybe that's where I'm focused. So I'm going to look for organizations that are doing something around brand positioning, where they're trying to establish associations in consumers' minds and to competitively position their brand versus another brand in consumers' minds. So as I'm doing interviews and I'm talking to that company, I'm thinking about the theory all the time. So connecting it in the teaching note should be fairly easy because the kind of questions that I'm going to be asking are about the kind of associations that the brand established, about the way that the brand established those associations through social media or through advertising or through product placement. I'm probably going to be asking in the teaching note questions about in what ways could the brand manager reinforce those brand positionings. And again, I'm going to be thinking about associative network theory because that's, as a scholar, what I'm interested in. So Shahid, that's the way I would connect it. You want to constantly ask yourself as you're writing the case, what am I trying to teach? What's the learning outcome? What's the theory base that I'm trying to demonstrate or investigate through this case? And if you're asking yourself that question all the time, then it should be connected in your work all the time. So those are the kind of checklists I would have for myself as I'm doing this work. The one thing I would say there, Shahid, is it's iterative, right? You don't start one place and then go through a second step or a third step or a fourth step. There's lots of feedback loops. It's an iterative process of constantly asking yourself, have you investigated the theory rigorously? Have you told the story clearly? Have you thought about how you're going to teach this comprehensively? It's an iterative process of putting this together.
Perfect. That was the perfect explanation I could ever hear about this particular issue. Thank you.
All good, all good. Dr. Abdullah, I see another few questions coming through.
I think Nuria ma'am want to ask something.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for the wonderful insights about case study. I just wanted to ask, you discussed about Stephen Curry and what were the ingredients that you wanted to put and for as an academician. so that it becomes a good case study on branding or any marketing issue?
Great question. And what I think I heard you ask was kind of what was the theory base, or what was some of the issues that I looked at in that case. So I was led in that case by the issue faced by the business. So this was a industry contact here in Oakland in the San Francisco Bay Area. Brita is a brand of Clorox, which is a big company here in Oakland. And so I met the marketing director just in passing, right? He's not an alumni of our school. He wasn't a previous contact. I just met him at a networking function. And so I hit it off, and we were talking about his MBA. He did his MBA at Wharton, which, as you know, is a pretty cool school here in the US. And so he knew about case studies. He'd done a whole bunch of case studies during his MBA. And so we were just chatting, and then he told me about this sponsorship, because I told him I was in sport and I was working with the Golden State Warriors. He told me about the sponsorship that they had with Steph Curry. And he said, the interesting thing about the sponsorship is it didn't work. And I was like, what? What do you mean a sponsorship of Steph Curry doesn't work? I mean, he's the MVP. If you know basketball, he's like a superstar, and he continues to still be a superstar. What do you mean it didn't work? And then this guy, Kittredge, he kind of told me more about their strategy and what they did, and essentially how they had to change the strategy halfway through because it wasn't working. Essentially, it wasn't selling Brita filters. It was cool stuff, but it wasn't selling the product. And so it's a great example for me to teach in the classroom around sponsorship return on investment. I want students in my classroom here in the US to understand how sponsorship is not just about tickets and going to cool games and seeing great content and hanging out with great athletes, right? As I think about the Indian cricket team, or I think about Protea Fire, and I think about the games that we compete against each other in cricket, etc. Sponsorship is also about selling product. It's got to deliver a return on investment. And this was a great example. So the theory base here, when I'm thinking about sponsorship ROI, I'm thinking about return on marketing investment. I'm thinking about media metrics. I'm thinking about, sponsorship ROI as a body of knowledge, right? And so those are the kind of learning outcomes that I would have had. And so I heard a cool story. It was an interesting story that you don't hear very often of a sponsorship that doesn't work, because most of the time you read about sponsorships that do work, because that's the ones people want to talk about. It's great when you hear about a story where something didn't work, and he was prepared to talk about it and for me to write about it. And then in the classroom, I could teach that by thinking about some of the key content and some of the key theories that I want students to have, right, as they think about going into the marketplace and developing good sponsorship. So that's how that one developed. And I hope what you're seeing here is that for many cases, they start in different places, and you need to be open to kind of have a radar where you're open and you're listening for potential case studies. And then when something pops up from an alumni or from a contact or from a conversation, you're able to think about constructing it in some way.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Where are we going, Dr. Abdullah?
I want to say.
Sir, Reshma Bam is raising the hand.
All right, sounds good.
Good evening, Professor Goldman. It has been, I think everyone has been saying this statement that it has been a very insightful an hour session with you. My association with Emerald Emerging Market Case Studies goes back 2012. It is almost 10 years when we got our first case study published. And I believe EEMS was also starting its journey there and only around that time. So it has been a 10-year association. Fortunately, I have been associated as a reviewer of some of the case studies you shared with me. Many of our colleagues have also got their case studies published with you. Case study, as you very rightly said, should create an impact. And with the title itself of emerging market case studies, what you have done is given us a platform to us as researchers, us as academicians, given us a platform to bring in cases or situation, real life business scenarios in our situation, in our context, and share it with the. Generally, what happens is, as we teach, it has been a 25-year journey in academics for me. As we teach, what we have been doing in the context of case analysis, we have been taking context, the cases in the Western world, and teaching them to the Indian students, right? And the context is entirely different. The behavioral patterns are different. The industries also respond in a different way. So, by giving us a platform to bring things uh, in the context of the Indian diaspora or the South Asian diaspora, that is a very, I must congratulate you all, the whole team who has thought of this concept of giving us a platform. Secondly, for all the research scholars who have joined in here, writing a case study and writing a research paper, these are two different things, quite different. I would say there are two sides of the coins with opposing ends. So when we are writing a research paper, you are more quantitatively focused, and what you're doing is chronologically taking on the literature review, identifying the gaps, and therein framing questions and getting answers, and then interpreting it and then putting it, right? But for a case study, you need to have a purpose. You need to have a purpose in the sense that, and the gap should come from your expertise in teaching. So when you are teaching, and like you very rightly said, if that kind of case is not available, then you need to prepare it. And that is where one of the lacuna is in the Indian academic system is, most of us do not have much of industry academia partnership. So the ideas do not come that way. Secondly, liaising and networking will give us a platform for all the research scholars, I may add here. Uh, Liaising, networking will give you an idea, and then consistently reading newspapers, seeing what are the trends in the business world, and like you told that you have to go for a say a longitudinal study. So from a secondary data also, over a period of time, if you are following a particular company and how it has been progressing, you may be able to establish a narrative. You may be able to do that. But it has been a wonderful experience hearing from you, Professor Goldman, and you have been very, very articulate. And I thank Abdullah for bringing you on this platform. I hope this dialogue continues in future. You interact with us further in further sessions as well. So, on behalf of Jamia Hamdard uh, and the Department of Management and the School of Management Studies, we thank you, sir, for sparing your time. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Reshma. It's a great conversation. I appreciate your comments. And as a reviewer, I appreciate all the contributions that you've made to EMCS over the years. Thank you. It is through reviewing that we often learn how to do this better. And so our reviewers get feedback on their reviews. We give them feedback every year, as well as after every case that they review, they get a copy of what the associate editor thinks, and they get a copy of what the other reviewers think of a case. So reviewing cases, just like reviewing any article or scholarship, is a great way to learn. And so we appreciate the work you've done there. All right, with the other hands, let's see. Where are we going?
Yes, ma'am. Sadaf ma'am want to ask something.
All right.
Hello,
Yes.
sir.
Hello.
That was really wonderful. Am I audible?
Yes.
It was wonderful listening to you, and your presentation was really to the point and very crisp. And I would like to thank Dr. Abdullah for connecting us with you. And I was just wondering if we would have a collaborative initiative for conducting a conference that is primarily based on case research and case studies. If somehow we can connect and collaborate on that front, it would be really great.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think as we come out of the pandemic, as we
Yeah.
have more opportunities to spend time together physically, I think it's a great idea. My friends at NACRA would beat me up if I didn't mention the North American Case Research Association conference in October in Niagara Falls. So that's a great opportunity for people who are able to come across to North America and spend 3 days with a wonderful group of case researchers. And there are other conferences like that that are happening. I think collaboration is a great opportunity. I think if there are specific plans in place with some good lead times and an opportunity to bring people from different parts of the world together, I'd
Right.
certainly welcome that. And if it works for my calendar, I'll be on the first plane back to Delhi.
We would just love
Yeah,
that. We would just love that.
it would be wonderful. So yeah, I think I think as we think through what kind of conference format or workshop or structure would make sense, we want to provide an opportunity for people to share their work under development, to learn from others around how to do different pieces, to build some relationships and mentorship, to think about co-authors and collaborations across countries. So if we're able to build those aspects into something, yeah, then I think it sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, we can get Dr. Arif or Dr. Abdullah to connect with you on this front, and if we can work out this proposition, then it would be great, sir.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I see some questions as well in the chat. Let me kind of get to those before we have to close off. I see a question here. Is it Hans Prabha? A question about scoring or thinking about the quality of case studies. So Hans Prabha, there are a few ways to think about this. Remember that we don't use the citation-based system because cases are typically not cited as the typical Thomson Reuters kind of citation system. And so the way we think about quality within case studies is two or three ways. One, we think about reach. So the uptake of the case, the usage of the case, how many students in how many places have used that case, how many instructors in how many classrooms have used that case. So that certainly is one way that you would argue for the impact of your work. The other way I would focus on the publication that you're putting your case in and the editorial processes. So EMCS, for example, is Scopus ranked and follows a range of double-blind peer review editorial processes with reviewers and associate editors, etc., that communicates to the scholarly academic world the principles, the publishing principles that we follow. And I think that's an important consideration in thinking about where you put your case. So I think those are kind of two important considerations, where to publish and then what's the reach or impact of that case. And certainly as I talk to my colleagues in the NACRA space and Ivy Publishing and Harvard Publishing, similar kinds of questions as they think about attracting case authors and publishing those cases around the world. So I hope that helps kind of think through that question. Rachi's question here as well. Thank you. Writing teaching notes and studying the adoption of technology in rural areas, the problems, the devices, the format of the case study. So Rachi, I think what I would encourage you to look at is the organization and the decision maker within that context. So if I'm thinking about adoption of technology in rural areas, is it a handset maker, handset manufacturer, for example? Is it a mobile airtime provider? Is it a software provider, an app creator? Is it a market regulator or something like that? So the kind of organization that would be trying to make technology work in rural environments, that's where I would focus. And so you can study this problem from the perspective of multiple decision makers in multiple kind of organizations. And the best case studies are typically about one or more protagonists, one or more decision makers in an organization, in one organization. They make the best cases because they work the best in the classroom. Students can identify with some kind of manager who's facing some kind of problem and has to make a decision. And so that's typically where I would focus. The one other idea that you may want to think about is those cases that Michael Porter wrote. So Michael Porter did some really interesting cases, which he published with Harvard Publishing in his microeconomics of competitiveness unit. So there's a center at Harvard called microeconomics of competitiveness. It's where Michael Porter did a lot of his work. And they published some cases that are a little bit different. They published cases that are at the national regulation or policy level, like Singapore. Michael Porter wrote a case about the president of Singapore, right? The CEO of Singapore, and the running of the country of Singapore, the city state of Singapore. So that's a different kind of case, not just about a company and a CEO. He also wrote a case about the wine industry cluster in Chile, in South America. Again, a different structure kind of case where it was about a cluster and a set of companies or a set of organizations. So those aren't typical cases, but have a look at those and they could inspire you in terms of their structure for how you might be able to investigate this question through some good quality case research.
Thank you so much for that answer. It was really helpful. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. All right. Any other questions? Dr. Abdullah, I'm in your hands.
I think there is no other question.
All right. Well, I'm going to post in the chat the website for NACRA. So if anyone is interested in the North American Case Research Association and the conference coming up in October and those kind of environments, I think that is perhaps an interesting place to look. And then I'm also going to just publish a post quickly here for those interested in Emerald Publishing and EMCS, Emerging Market Case Studies, as Reshma mentioned earlier. You can get access there to all our cases and all the resources that I mentioned, the Cases Hub, and all of that kind of information. And then finally, let me post my email address here. So if anybody does want to reach out with any additional queries or comments or anything, please do that. I'll send a copy of the slides across. Dr. Abdullah, if you want to share that with everyone.
Yes, you can send me and then I will share to everyone.
Sounds good. And then I look forward to the conversation.
Okay, so thanks to all of you for attending this program. I am delivering the vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Michael Goldman, sir, for sparing his time out of his busy schedule and staying connected with you to accommodate us. Even at night time in his time zone, that is very important for us. He has greatly covered the importance of impactful case research. We are immensely thankful to him for delivering such an excellent lecture on case research. Then I would like to thank Shibu sir, Dean SMBS, for always supporting our initiatives. And Syed Nadimul Haq, head of the Department of Management. I would also like to thank Reshma ma'am and Sadaf ma'am for motivating and supporting us and make this program possible. I would also like to thank Dr. Arif, Swati, and Neha for their coordination, and all the faculty members, scholars, and students for their active participation. Thanks a lot for to all of you. We are really happy, Dr. Goldman, sir, that you have attended and you have delivered such a wonderful lecture. It was a
Yeah,
great
Dr.
interaction.
Goldman, at the end, I just wanted to share with you on behalf of Vice Chancellor that we'll be very happy to host you in Jamia New Delhi. Whenever you make your plan to come to Jamia Hamdard, let us know, sir, and we'll be very happy to meet you in person. And we can, make arrangement to make your stay in the campus. We have a beautiful scholars house. So looking forward to meet you in person.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your hospitality, great engagement, awesome questions. Obviously, some fabulous colleagues that you have as part of your group, and so I look forward to seeing all the great work that comes out, and then hopefully grabbing a good cup of coffee on campus in Delhi in the next few years. So thank you very much. I really appreciate
Yes, absolutely.
it. All right, we'll speak to everyone soon.
Thank you, sir.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
bye.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So there is this attendance link for everyone, for all the scholars and for all the attendees. Please fill it up. This is not just the attendance link. This is also a link for providing the feedback for the lecture. Don't forget to fill this up. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Sir, but as a PhD scholar, we didn't have our enrollment number yet. We didn't
No
receive
issues.
it.
You can just leave it blank, or you can just put
Okay.
your application number. That's
Thank you.
it's
Thank
just for the identification of the scholar. Maybe somebody is having the similar namesake, or maybe in that particular case, we are having that particular option.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
See you soon with another session with another speaker. Take care, everyone.
Yeah.
Winding up this session.
Thank you,
Dr.
sir.
Abdullah, Neha, thank you. I'll just wind up the session now.
Okay, sir. Okay,
Yeah.
the session has come to the end.
Okay.
I think everyone can leave now, right?
Yeah.
Great,
So
sir.
I'm just winding up this.